Hey, good afternoon. My name is Lee. Once again, that music was courtesy of a friend named Dave Bradley down in North Carolina. This is my third of these videos, the second real one if you don't want to count that first one, my introduction video. Today what I want to do is actually begin the series of videos that I had planned and anticipated until yesterday. My video yesterday, if you recall, it was a little emotional. I shared some stuff that's going on in my life and put that out there. But today I do want to begin the first in several videos of going through the Beatitudes, which is a series of blog posts that I have begun. I haven't completed them, but I have begun them. So a lot of this material is coming from things that I've already written and shared, and as I continue to write and share new things, I will include those here. But I'm going to begin by reading the text from the Gospel of Matthew. This is taken from the Christian Standard Bible, newer translation that I've recently started using. And I'm going to read beginning in verse 5. It says, "When he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to teach them, saying, 'Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs.'" And then Jesus says, "You are blessed when they insult you and persecute you and falsely say every kind of evil against you because of me. Be glad and rejoice, because your reward is great in heaven, for that is how they persecuted the prophets who were here before you." This section of Scripture, which is commonly referred to as the Beatitudes, is a series of statements Jesus makes at the start of what we typically refer to as the Sermon on the Mount. That section of Matthew's Gospel covers all of chapters 5, 6, and 7, and it's actually sandwiched into context right between Jesus calling his first disciples and this list, or this account of miraculous healings, and this sermon is right smack dab in the middle of it, and these Beatitudes are the way that Jesus begins this sermon. A lot of people, scholars, suggest that these Beatitudes, this way of thinking, is an introduction into all the teachings that are going to follow. Jesus is describing what life is like when you're pursuing the kingdom of heaven versus the kingdom of earth, or trying to keep the law that had been given. Much of what he has to say is steeped in the Old Testament on things that they already knew, things that they had already been taught, things that they had already believed. And it's important to notice because there are some people who mistakenly try to suggest that Jesus did away with the Old Testament and did away with the law. And he never does that. He never does away with the requirement of the law. In fact, later on in Matthew chapter 5, just right after these Beatitudes, he says, not one little single letter or piece of punctuation will be cast aside. He didn't come to destroy the law or abandon the law. He actually came to fulfill it. What he actually did was he tried to expand the way people understood the law and showed how to practically live out the things that God was trying to teach them from the very beginning through the law. Several of the things Jesus says here would have been considered shocking to the original audience, given their view of the law, and in the way that the Pharisees guarded the law with an iron fist. They just clamped down on people, and they were the legalist. They were the fundamental, conservative, religious right of their day, and they just brutalized people with the law. And what the law was intended to do was to show people God's standard. We talked a little bit about this today in our sermon as we finished up the names of God. And we were talking about God is our righteousness. God laid down a standard and said, this is how I want you to live. This is what I want you to pursue. This is the target I want you to shoot for. And that's what the law was. It says, this is the standard. This is what I expect from you. And it was supposed to show the people how to live holy, separate lives from the rest of the world and to pursue righteousness. But by the time Jesus come around, it had become a money-making scheme with the temple. The religious leaders had become political leaders almost in a sense, and the system had become oppressive, and it manipulated people. And the religious leaders took full advantage of that. Not only the Pharisees, but the Sadducees, who were the liberal. They didn't really believe much of anything. They controlled the temple and made lots of money on organized, systematic religion and this bondage that people felt to the law. What we see here is Jesus, once again, not doing away with the law, not doing away with the standard, but he's showing that living in the spirit of the law is better than just mindlessly, meticulously trying to follow it and live a perfect life and never mess up. Our actions are important. As I pointed out in our sermon today, God hasn't changed his standards. God didn't move the target. It's still perfection. He still wants us to be righteous. And our actions are important. In fact, he says, if you love me, you'll obey my commandments. But our attitudes are just as important, if not more important, when it concerns these things. And the religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees specifically, even though they had this outward righteousness, their attitudes just stunk. Some have often suggested that Jesus is actually creating a new religion here, contrary to the law. And that's not true either. He's not creating a new religion. He's not creating a new law. He's not setting a new standard. He's clearly defining what God had always intended. He's clearly defining what God had always expected of his people. He's showing what the law meant in the very first place when it was given. And as you go through these Beatitudes, many people, many scholars see this natural progression as you work through these 8, 9, depending on how you count verses 11 and 12. But as you progress, there's a definite starting point, and you move, and each step is a progression. It's a step up. And I tend to agree with that, not because I'm some biblical scholar, mostly due to the fact that the professors I studied at under Bible college taught that and pointed out those distinctions. And in my own studies and reading it and studying it and reading different commentaries, I can see that progression as well. I think it makes sense. But it's not through any brain work of mine. I'm just repeating what I have been taught and what I've seen and what looks like makes sense from the text. I actually liken it to the progression that you see in Psalm 1, which has also been pointed out by many scholars. In Psalm 1, verse 1, which is actually, it takes the form of a beatitude if you look at it, but the first verse of Psalm 1 says, "How happy," or blessed, there's that word, "how happy is the one who does not walk in the advice of the wicked, or stand in the pathway of sinners, or sit in the company of mockers." And you see that progression. Walking, standing, and sitting. And in this case, it's actually a regression. And it is interesting to note that a lot of the English translations render that as, instead of how happy, is how blessed, using the same concept, the same idea. So when Jesus begins this sermon with these series of statements, blessed are, or how happy is, or how fortunate, depending on the different translations you have out there, in their minds they naturally could have gone back and made the connection to Psalm 1, the beginning of their book of worship, so to speak. And it's a progression. When you look at Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 through 12, which is this section we're calling the Beatitudes, or not we're calling, it's the section that is called the Beatitudes. You can almost view it as a sort of how-to guide, for lack of a better analogy, to be part of the kingdom. To use another famous series of books, it's kind of like Kingdom Life for Dummies. But what you see is you realize to be part of the kingdom and to be a disciple of Christ or a follower of Christ are the same thing. You can't be one and not be in the other. You can't choose one and not choose the other. And this is the starting point. This is outlining what it looks like to take step after step after step to become a full disciple of Christ. And it pretty much sets the stage for everything he's going to say throughout the rest of this sermon and throughout the rest of the Gospel of Matthew during his ministry on earth. And what my goal is not only in that written blog, but in these video sections that are going to accompany it, is kind of dissect these one at a time and see perhaps what kind of personal applications I can make in my life, what type of devotional applications can be found, and perhaps we can all get something out of this. As always, I want people to watch this. If you watch it, let me know that you watched it. Click that you liked it or that you disliked it if that's the case. Leave a comment and let me know. I enjoyed this. I didn't enjoy this. Perhaps you should try this. And give me some feedback. A lot of that will determine how much more time and effort, what type of resources I pull into this. If this thing becomes legitimate and becomes an interactive thing and people listen and respond, it's my eventual goal is to buy equipment where I can actually produce something that looks professional or as professional as I can make it. And hopefully it can be an extension of not only this written blog, but an extension of my ministry here at Granville Center Church of Christ. I've got a couple of friends that I have mentioned that we had tossed around the idea of doing a series of video blogs or a podcast or something. And I'm just kind of doing this as an experiment to see, do I have something interesting to say? Will people listen? Will people respond? And hopefully this will be a springboard for something bigger, not just dealing with me. But if nothing else, I can use it in my own devotional time, my own personal time, and it helps me sort through things. I'll go back and watch these videos whether anybody else does or not, and hopefully I can get something out of them. But that's that. That's some introductory material to these Beatitudes, Matthew chapter 5. And we'll see what happens when I get through these. I haven't even gone through all of them on my written blog yet, so this is going to be a process, and I hope these videos, hope they inspire my writing, and I can continue to build on these things and continue to do some more things. And I'm looking forward to seeing what may come out of this. So that, my friends, is the second real video, and it's the first video in what I had originally planned on starting here. I really do hope you are watching. I really do hope there's somebody out there that is listening. If there is, let me know. Leave a comment. And I look forward to hearing from you all. And we'll close with that little snippet from Dave Bradley.